Hello, friends and extended family. It's been a while. I'm working on my book. It's um, it's hard. It's hard to get all of that crap out onto paper, but I've managed to get the outline done, the foreword, and I'm into chapter 3. So I'm looking at about 12 chapters, and this will be sort of my factual clinical sort of existence in life up to date. I'm working my way through the childhood portion, which I think contains the majority of sort of traumatic, life altering events. And I'm going through it. I've pulled back a little bit from the adoption forums. I'm trying to actively not participate as much. I still scroll through and like this and that. But I'm also finding that I'm not drawn in as much. I'm not triggered as much by some of the things that people say. And I think what I'm experiencing with the adoption forums and the adoption recovery and whatnot, and especially now getting to the point where I'm creating my entire situation and not just talking about specific events, but trying to put all those events in for examination, and trying to keep it as real and as honest as I possibly can, so that I can just let it go. Because I think what I'm starting to discover and realize with adoption is that it's very much like my life as an alcoholic, right? So when I attended Alcoholics Anonymous, they recommend to do 90 meetings in 90 days. And, when you go in there, you're really not sure exactly how that's going to work. But ultimately, what it is it's a form of Gnosticism in that you can sit with people and listen to the horrific things they tell you about themselves and the things that went on with the drinking. And at a certain point, you start to hear the truth of things, the bigger truth. So with alcoholism, I mean that's a huge area of dysfunction that a single alcoholic isn't going to experience all of. But in attending something like Alcoholics Anonymous, you can hear, the great big overarching nightmare of alcoholism that you don't hear in the regular polite society that covers up its issues and problems and flaws. So after a few years of that, attending quite regularly, paying attention, listening, doing the work myself, recovering from alcoholism, being able to get to a point where alcohol is no longer a fear, it's no longer a huge factor in my life. After that extended period of time and hearing so much information, eventually you go from the point where you're constantly hearing new information to a point where you're not hearing very much new information at all, and it starts to become redundant, and eventually it leads to a point where you sort of outgrow it. And that's sort of where I got to about a year and a half, 2 years ago with Alcoholics Anonymous, whereas it was no longer a positive, it was starting to become a negative, and in fact, it was starting to make me want to drink because there was no longer growth there for me to be had. I think it's something I'll still attend over the years and throughout time, pop in, see where things are at, remind myself of the negatives because as addicts or people with addictive addiction problems, they tend to erase the negatives that went with something like alcohol, and then nostalgize the positives, right? And we do that with a lot of things. We do that with relationships, single versus in a relationship, etc. But what I'm trying to get at is that with the adoption forums, I've come to a similar sort of place, whereas the adoption is no longer bothering me as much. The adoption industry existing unaltered, and for its corrupt issues that it still suffers, bothers me. It bothers me that people are still unaware that adoption isn't a good thing. So I guess for me, I've just heard so many different scenarios of adoption. We now have in vitro coming into the front, the open adoption, these sorts of things. But I think ultimately I've just gotten to a point where as the forums no longer provide me support. My understanding of adoption has sort of left the personal level. I still think it's very destructive practice, en masse separating family members from family members. Is basically what we're looking at, which seems to be the big goal. So I think ultimately what and where I'm at is the book is going to finish off my adoption recovery, and after that I think I'll move more into maybe some fictional writing, whereas I can start perhaps taking my understandings of adoption, the world, the way things are going, and trying to project them into some fictional works to help maybe bring some new ideas into the adoption paradigm of where we could go, and where it's possible to go, and perhaps to continue my recovery in that sort of manner, whereas the goal is to get myself healthy, both physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally, which is coming along, and then to continue the work into the mental plane of things through narratives, and to maybe step back from the political debates and the more ground floor debates about adoption, so I can maybe avoid some of the petty bickering that goes on in groups over positive and negative views about adoption, over whether it's the birth parents or the adoptive parents to blame, things like that I've just kind of gotten over myself. And certainly I believe that each adoptee, if they're going to really put to bed the adoption issue in their own lives, is that they're really going to have to look at themselves and ultimately establish how adoption has affected them, if it was a necessary thing in their life, if that is a blessing from God, how so? But at the same token, I think it's very important that we are critical of adoption where it needs to be criticized, And I don't think we need to support negative political policies, negative adoption policies, and any sort of negative moral monetizations or policies concerning the children of our nations. So there's that. And all in all, I think things are good. I will continue, obviously, with my videos, letting you know how I'm coming along. I think with my adoption videos, I think it's all in there. You know, I do experience sort of a strange situation when I do my videos or when I write, whereas as soon as I'm finished writing or doing the video, the topic closes with it. You know, it's sort of sealed off within me, and I don't know what I've written. I don't know what I've spoken about. I have a hard time recalling that into memory, and I think that's a good thing, in the sense that once I finish writing the book, I can close it. And then if there ever is a question, or if someone has questions about how I feel about adoption, I can just say, here's my book. You can read it. I'm done with that now. And I'm just ready to move on with my own life as my authentic self that I've had to work hard to get to. So that's where I sit today, and I'll try and keep you guys updated. And thanks for the comments and whatnot. And I will keep you up to date on how this book is progressing. And if there's any ideas, you know, about how to, you know, writing ideas or publishing ideas or things like that, editors, blah, 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 because I know nothing. I know nothing about writing a book or any of those things. And I don't foresee it being a best-selling book, but at the same token, what do I know? All right, so we'll talk again soon, and thanks. I look forward to hearing your comments, likes, shares, whatever you want to do, and I obviously will continue to comment on and reply to all your comments. Talk soon. Bye.